to the first session for the series tutorial testing framework TestNG. Today in this session we are going to see what is TestNG, why use TestNG, and how can TestNG be used in our test automation. So let's get started. So what is TestNG? TestNG is an open source testing framework. Here, what does that open source means? Open source means you do not need to pay anything when you are working with TestNG, and there is something called NG. So NG means next generation. Okay, this framework is basically inspired by JUnit and NUnit. Now, earlier when we were working with the Java programming language, so there was a framework called JUnit which was used for the test as a testing framework. But now TestNG has a lot many features additionally, so people are working with TestNG. Okay, so if you're working with the programming language Java, so there are two frameworks available testing as a testing framework which can be used. One JUnit, another is TestNG. Okay, if you are working with the C# programming language, then there is a framework called NUnit, and if you are working with the Python, then there is a framework called PyTest. Okay, so this TestNG framework, all these testing frameworks have been designed to simplify all our testing requirements basically. Okay, now coming to the next slide. So why should anyone use TestNG? Okay, when we say like yeah, TestNG is a testing framework, can be used with the Java programming language. And also one more thing I want to add here is when you are working with Java and you want to work with the automation. Okay, now there are different type of applications we have. For example, there is something called web application, there is something called mobile application, and there is something called REST APIs, right? Now, if you want to automate all of these applications with the help of Java, so we have some libraries available. Like for web, we can use Selenium WebDriver API. For mobile, we can go with APM. For REST APIs, we have something called REST Assured. So all these types of automation when you are working with a Java programming language, so this TestNG is a testing framework which can be used. Okay. Now, why use TestNG? So because it has a flexible test configuration. What happens when you work with TestNG? It has a support of annotations. So what all these annotations are, will have a detailed session for this. But if you go and search for TestNG annotations, TestNG official doc, always refer the official documentation, guys, if it is available. Okay, you see there are lot many annotations available here with the TestNG. Like there is something called before shoot, which means that the annotated method will be run before all the tests in the shoot have run. Okay, something called after shoot, we have after test, before class, after method. So for the details of these annotations, like what these annotations will do, how do they behave, okay, we'll have a detailed session later. But yeah, this is one of the benefit, like it has a lot of annotation support, with the help of which what we can achieve the flexible test configuration. Second, we have something called, we can basically control the flow of the test cases execution. For example, if your application has 10 functionalities, and what you have done, you have developed 100 test cases for the UI. Okay, now all those 100 test cases you have marked as regression under the regression category, but there are some test cases, for example 35 test cases you have marked as smoke, or 30 as sanity, or 25 as BVT. This BVT is something called build verification test. Okay, now for example, if you do not have much time and you just want to execute the test cases which covers the critical functionalities of the application, then you can group your test cases under some custom category as well. And if you only want to execute those 35 or 30 or 40 test cases, so TestNG allows you to execute those only test cases with the help of a feature called grouping. Okay, there is something called prioritizing. So with the help of TestNG, there is an attribute basically which can be attached with the annotation test, with the help of which we can prioritize our test cases. Okay, the priority has to be given in terms of integer. It can be given in minus, it can be 0, it can be 1. Okay, so it will go from left to right, like -1 0 1. Okay, also what happens, like TestNG allows to execute the test cases in the parallel mode. Okay, suppose you have 100 test cases and you want to execute this test cases in a parallel mode. For example, if you whether if it is a UI test cases you have developed. Okay, now if you want that, yeah, 5 Chrome browser instances has to be started, and 5 test cases has to be executed simultaneously. Okay, so this kind of support is also like provided by the TestNG. You need to handle that Chrome driver stuff in the code, you have to implement that, but TestNG allows you to achieve this parallel execution of the test cases. Also, there is a support of data driven testing. Now, what does the data driven testing means? So this is something like we want to perform the testing, okay, but there is something called we have something called data. So we are going to drive this data basically from some file. It can be an XML file, it can be a JSON file, it can be an Excel file, okay, any kind of file you can maintain. So we are going to have a session like where we'll be passing the data, we'll be passing the test data for the testing basically from the testng.xml file. Okay, now what does this testng.xml file? We'll cover this as well. Now, there is something called data providers, guys. Okay, for example, when we are working on any functionality, for example, there is a login functionality has been developed in your application, and you want to test that functionality. So we got the scenario, right? We have the test scenario for login functionality. So what are we going to do? We are going to design the test cases for that. I mean to say, for example, login with the valid data, login with the invalid data, or login with no or empty credentials. Okay, login with the improper format of the email, basically. Okay, so these are the basically different test cases for the login test scenario. Okay, now for example, if you want to execute the same test case, for example, if you want to perform the login operation using the valid data, okay, so what you can do, TestNG allows you to use a something called data provider. Basically, with the help of that data provider, you can execute the same test case but with multiple data sets. For example, login with valid data. Okay, what you can do, for example, you maintain Excel sheet, you're going to put data there like username 1 password 1, username 2 password 2, username 3 password 3. Okay, so we have three data sets there, right? So you do not need to change anything in the test code. Okay, you just need to use the data provider stuff, and that test case is going to execute three times because we have three data sets. If you have 30 data sets, that test case is going to execute 30 times then. Okay, this depends on the completely our requirements. Also, coming to the next benefit of this, suppose if you have executed 100 test cases, and out of those 100 test cases 95 got passed but 5 got failed. Okay, now there may be a thing like when you are working for a UI test cases, there was a network drop. Okay, there was not a good internet connection, so maybe because of that the test case got failed at that time. Now automatically, like programmatically, if you want to execute this test cases, so TestNG allows us to do that. There is something called iRetry analyzer interface provided by the TestNG. Okay, so we can use that, we can automatically rerun those failed test cases. Also, TestNG does not only allow us to execute the test cases, it also generates the reports. Okay, with the help of that report, what we can achieve is we can get the total test cases count, like this, the total test, for example, total test cases executed 100, 90 got passed, 10 got failed. Okay, so on the basis of test results, we can clearly see like which test case got passed, which test case got took how much time. Okay, so everything. Now, we already seen in the Maven tutorials, like we are going to use Maven as a build automation tool in our projects. Okay, so how can we add the TestNG dependency? Basically, if you check, if you go here, there is a playlist for the Maven. Okay, if you go here, you can check the tutorials for the Maven. Okay, now to how can we add the TestNG dependency? So how do we add it? We first go to the Maven repository. Go to the first link, Maven repository. We have to search for the dependency which we need. We need TestNG. Okay, go here, click on it. These all are the versions provided by the TestNG team for the TestNG. So this is the latest one, 7.7.1, and it was released December 29, 2022. If you click on this, see already Maven is selected, right? You just need to copy this, and you have to paste this content which you have copied from the Maven central repository into the pom.xml file. We saw in the Maven tutorial, like in the second tutorial it was, that how can we create a Maven project and what does that pom.xml file means and how does the dependencies get added. You see, under the dependencies tag, this is line number 17, we have added the dependency for TestNG. Okay, this is 7.7.0, and when we load this Maven changes, so what happens? From the Maven central repository to a local system, these dependencies get downloaded, and also the references have been added. You see, there is something called TestNG has been added here. This is org.testng. This is the package name. Okay, and these dependencies are coming from the Maven. Okay, because we added this content in the pom.xml file. And what did Maven do for us? So Maven actually downloaded those dependencies from the Maven central repository to a local machine. Okay. Again, how do we create a test case then? Basically, in Java when we are working, so we have something called packages. You see there is written something called package org.example. If you check here, like we get the Maven structure already created, like we have some directories created like src main Java, src test Java. So under the src test Java, we need to have these test cases. Okay, doesn't matter we have the test cases for mobile application, for APIs, or for web application. Test cases have to be present inside the test src test Java directory only. Okay. Now, how do you create a test case? Basically, when you are working with Java, we have to work with the classes and methods, right? So we are going to create a class. This app test is nothing but a sample, like it's a class name. Okay, and this is a custom method. You see, the name of the custom method is test underscore sample. In Java, class name has to start with the first letter caps, and the method which we have has to start with a small. Okay, now this annotation test, this test is an annotation which is basically coming from the TestNG. You see there are two import statements added on the line number 3 and 4. So first is org TestNG assert, then we have something called org TestNG annotations test. So this test is an annotation which came from the TestNG framework. Also there is something called assert which has been used on the line number 18. This is basically a class which has a predefined methods which can be used for putting the validations. Basically, in this example, what I am doing, I have taken two different strings. Okay, I have the name of the variable is actual and the second variable name is expected. So we are just doing the comparison. You see, we are using the method called assert equals, which is nothing but a predefined method coming from the assert class. Okay, so actual expected, we are comparing these two strings, these two variables, and this is the message assertion for strings exact match. Okay, so this is how we need to create a test case, and this is how we can put the validation. There are different methods available when we are working with the assert class. We'll see in the later sessions. We'll cover everything. Okay, coming to the next slide, there is one more way actually. There is something called testng.xml file. For example, if you have written 100 test cases for your application, okay, so we are not going to execute it one by one. We are not going to go inside one test case, then execute second test case, go and execute. No, we are going to execute those test cases with the help of something called testng.xml file. Basically, this file is something which is going to help us to execute those 100 test cases in one go. For example, if you want to execute those 100 test cases in one shot, you can do. If you only want to execute those 35 smoke test cases, you can do. Okay, if you want to execute the test cases in a parallel mode, you can do. Okay, so how do we create that testng.xml file? You see, like you just need to do a right click on the test case file. You get an option of create and testng xml. Okay, now this testng.xml file will get added to the root of your project. This is the name of the project. You see, like tutorial YouTube Rajat testing framework testng. Okay, and this is how this file looks like. Okay, now coming to the next slide, how are you going to execute those test cases using this file? You just need to right click on the testng.xml and you'll get an option of run testng.xml file. Okay, if suppose if you are working with the Eclipse IDE or and you are not getting these options, so what you can do, you can basically refer, there is a playlist. If you are working with Mac, please refer this one. If you are working with Windows, please refer this one. Okay, this is basically for example, if you go inside the Windows, this has the this playlist basically has a software setup. Okay, in the OS Windows and test automation for web using Selenium WebDriver and Java. Okay, so Java JDK setup, you can refer this. For Maven, you can refer this one. For IntelliJ IDE and Eclipse IDE, you can refer. So what I was saying is, like, if you are not getting these options, you can refer that Eclipse IDE one video. Okay, there I have mentioned like how can you add the TestNG plugin to the Eclipse IDE for both Mac and Windows OS. Okay, you see when you are running this testng.xml file, we are getting something in the console. This is basically a console screenshot where it is referring that this was some class called app test. There was some test case called test underscore sample. Okay, and it is showing us that total test run 1 and out of those one, the result is passed. Okay, so passes count is one. So one, we executed one test case, and that one test case itself got passed. If it fails, so the fail count will come here, and if something is there which is skipped, for example, if any test case got skipped, so that count will come here. Okay, also I told you like TestNG has a lot of features. Among those features, there is something called reports generation. So basically it generates different types of reports. You see, when you execute the test case, okay, using testng.xml file, so there is a directory called test-output will be created automatically in your project at the root location. Under that, you will have the multiple reports option here. If you will get something called emailable-report.html file, you will get something called index.html file. Okay, so all these files have been automatically generated when you executed the test cases using TestNG. Okay, so these are the two screenshots basically from two reports. Okay, where it's saying like you executed this test case. The test case name was test underscore sample, and this is something called org example app test. So org.example is the package name, and under this package we have a class called app test. Under this app test class we have a method called test underscore sample, which was working as a test case. Why? Because we annotated that custom method with the annotation called test. Okay, yeah. So I think we're good with this session. In the upcoming sessions, we are going to see like what are the different multiple ways to execution, with the help of which we can execute our test cases. We are going to create a Maven project. We're going to add the dependencies for TestNG. We're going to have multiple test cases. Also, in later sessions, we're going to see what all are the attributes available with the test annotation. How can we achieve the parameterization? How can we use the data providers when we are working with Excel or JSON or XML files? Okay, what are the listeners provided by the TestNG? So a lot of topics are there with the TestNG framework. We are going to cover everything, and yeah, thank you so much for your time, and have a very good day. Thank you.